Former GM of the Chicago Bulls, Jerry Krause, mentioned that it is organizations that win championships. However, it is undeniable that players are the one who deserve to get the credit, since they do most of the heavy lifting. In the world of combat sports, it is the fighters who become the face of their respective brand. And throughout history, different personalities have defined their own era. For this week, we are putting the spotlight on these iconic warriors. Welcome to 7 MMA fighters who defined an era. Champion of 3 UFC tournaments and the known face of Gracie JiuJitsu. Royce Gracie opened a lot of eyes and showcased their family's fighting style to the general public. Many saw him as the underdog champion, since he was never the biggest or the strongest, but managed to beat others solely relying on his techniques. He also passed the torch to Kazushi Sakuraba in their historic Pride match. Fedor Emelianenko was the face that represented the alternative to the UFC and is considered by many as the greatest of all time. He had a winning streak spanning more than a decade before his decline. He beat the best heavyweights of his time. The last emperor avoided any embarrassing controversies and fought all comers during his reign. The original Ultimate Fighter and one of the few contestants to win a UFC championship, Forrest Griffin continues to be an executive for the company. Even though the coaches from their season were established fighters, it was his fight with Stephan Bonnar which saved a sinking ship. He is also a best-selling author and has notable wins against a number of legends in the light heavyweight division. The UFC was already selling out arenas nationwide after the success of The Ultimate Fighter. It only gained more exposure when they brought in Brock Lesnar. Many lapsed pro wrestling fans were intrigued that the NCAA heavyweight was transitioning to MMA. He only had a handful of matches for the company, but the cards he main evented broke pay-per-view records back then. When a TMZ cameraman asked Dana White the question, "When will women fight in the UFC?" the UFC president answered,
UFC, man.
Never.
He undeniably changed his mind when they brought in Ronda Rousey from Strikeforce. The Olympian judoka is the reason why women's MMA became mainstream. Her popularity transcended to different media, and she became one of the faces of the company. I'm not a Conor McGregor fan, but he did good numbers for the UFC. He represents the current era. He influenced the rise of many impersonators that rely on trash talk and only sought money fights. He barely defended his titles and hurt the divisions he reigned in. Regardless of the circumstances, the UFC marketed him as their guy. Demetrius Johnson had a dominant run in the UFC and is the current face of another brand, ONE FC. He can be considered as another candidate for the GOAT status. He held the record for the most consistent title defenses in the UFC, but still got traded to the Singapore-based company. His inclusion to their roster was able to attract more eyes to their brand.